the Madman!
Welcome to the Custom Hearthstone Cards of the week of August 18th. Now, I've read the comments and a lot of people have said Trump the design rating is influenced by the balance rating. And I have a few things to say about that. So first of all, there are just simply some unworkable designs. Cards that no matter how you change them, if you kept the spirit of the card as designed, would completely break the game. Like, there's no way to balance it, in other words. So those designs get a 1 score. Cards that I think have legitimate designs and could be rebalanced, I will give a higher rating to. So let's start off with Rescue Drone. It's a 3-mana 2/2 mech, which is magnetic also, and Death Rattle will return this minion to your hand. So you can play Rescue Drone by itself, or you can magnetize it onto one of your mechs that you want to gain the Death Rattle, return this minion to your hand, and also +2/+2. And I think it's a very cool design. I think it's fair in the sense that an infinite 2/2 for 3 mana, that would be okay. It's very slow, very mana intensive, well balanced, and well designed. So I'm going to rate it 5 stars for design and 5 stars on balance. Devoured Servant. Warlock card, 4 mana, 4/6, lifesteal, battle cry, deal 3 damage to this minion, which effectively gives it a battle cry of heal yourself for 3, and it's basically a 4 mana, 4/3. It has a little bit of different functionality because you can then heal the Devoured Servant back up to a 4/6. I think this is a fair card. It pushes the lifesteal a little bit, but I think that lifesteal is a mechanic that needs a little bit of pushing in terms of power level. I think the interaction of having a card with lifesteal and battle cry to deal damage to itself is cute. So, design 5 stars, balance 5 stars. We've got an interesting rogue card, Erie Passard. 3 mana, 3/3. Whenever this minion attacks the enemy hero, silence the minions it passes over. What we have here is a really flavorfully cool card. It's a ghost which, if it passes through you, it silences you. Like, the idea is outstanding, but there's a major problem in design here. And that problem is it's extremely unclear and will never be intuitive on what type of minions would be silenced. Like, yeah, you could play it on the board, and yes, you could make an indicator as you drag the Erie Passard by, but I find it to be really impractical and tough to, visualize. So while it's a cool idea, I'm going to rate the design just 2 stars because I feel like it's incredibly impractical to ever put in the game. From a balance perspective, it's a fair card. It's less good than most of the rogue cards that you would run in the deck, but it's not like you can really stat this up to 3 mana, 3/4. So I feel like the balance is in the right place. I'll give it 5 stars. Another rogue card, Generous Bacteriologist. 2 mana, 2/2. Battle cry, add a 1/1 bacteria to your opponent's hand. And the gimmick on this one is that the bacteria, while this is in your hand, add another copy of this to your hand at the end of your turn. So it's something that the opponent must play, otherwise their hand will eventually fill up with bacteria. But wait, that's not all. If you were to play Generous Bacteriologist and then you were to Shadow Step it and then play it again, your opponent would get 2 bacteria, which means that even if they did play 1 bacteria, the other one would duplicate. And it gets really bad if they get multiple of these because your 2 bacteria multiply to 4 bacteria, and then eventually your hand is full of bacteria and you're very sad. There are some ideas thrown around that maybe you make it a maximum copy of 1, but then you're basically giving your opponent the Paladin hero power, and that's a terrible card then. Maybe you nerf the cost of Generous Bacteriologist, or you reduce the cost of bacteria, but I feel like that makes the card also too weak because the bacteria is a 1 mana 1/1, and you get multiple bacteria, whatever then, and you want to play 1 mana 1/1. Ultimately, I believe this idea is not salvageable, so I'm going to rate the design of it 1 star. Also, the balance is a 1 star because you just almost win the game if you play Generous Bacteriologist and then you Shadow Step it, and then you play Generous Bacteriologist because it means that your opponent will have to, on turn 2 and 3, be forced to play the bacteria, otherwise they'll lose the game. And that's simply a terrible design. Well, actually, okay, here's the distinction. It's terrible balance. And yes, also terrible design because it's incredibly unfun. Dread Giant, a Warlock 12 mana card, which is an 8/8, as typical for Giants. Whenever you discard this card, reduce it to your hand and decrease its cost by 4. Elemental for some reason, probably because the author of the card was under the assumption that all the giants were elementals. This one in particular doesn't really look very elemental. They don't have to be elementals. My main gripes of this card is I think the design is a little bit off in that I don't think this should be one of the giants that costs 12. It's a really bad top deck in that case, and I feel like across most designs, giants have never really been unplayable if you have planned around it, but this card is just doesn't work as a top deck at all. So my suggestion to it is I feel like the design should not be a 12 mana card or a card that's always unplayable, but it should be 10 mana. But I feel like that would buff the card too much, so you could just make it to decrease its cost by 3, which would mean that instead of 12, 8, 4, 0, you're going 10, 7, 4, 1, 0. For that reason, I give the design 4 stars. Feel like the mana cost is a slight miss, and the balance is 4 stars because it needed a slight buff. Paradox, priest spell, 1 mana, discover a discover card that cannot discover this spell. This was mostly meant for just a cute card. It's given the thought process of can Paradox actually discover itself, visualizing a popular Paradox. Up to Blizzard whether or not they want to design so that Paradox can discover Paradox. I feel like they would. Ultimately though, this is mainly for the memes because there is a very small selection of cards you can discover with Paradox, and it's mostly neutral cards or a very select few priest cards. This card was mainly meant to be created just in order to tout the cleverness of the creator. But on the other hand, is there anything that Hearthstone could ever use this card for? No, I don't think so. So design in terms of would this ever possibly have any merit in a Hearthstone game? No, 1 star. The balance of this card is fair. It's actually a little bit on the weak card because it can only discover a very small selection of cards. Why not just play those cards? You could discover this as well as play those cards, but for the most part you wouldn't really want to. So 4 star in balance. And the cards that you would be really looking for would be Free from Amber and Eternal Servitude generally. The dragon aspects. 1 mana Quest and Kivler's Dream. Quest is to summon Alexstrasza, Deathwing, Nozdormu, Malygos, and Ysera. The reward is Galcarond. By the way, if your requirement is to summon those 5 dragon aspects, the reward better be at least enough to win the game. Galcarond, 5 mana, hero. Battlecry, fill your hand with random dragons. They cost 1 with a hero power of, whatever. Deal 1 damage to all enemies, lifesteal, it's Spirit Lash. There is a major flaw to this design, which is that I don't believe that Hearthstone will ever design a card where requirement is to essentially own both this card itself, which is a legendary, as well as 5 other legendaries. So design 1 star. For completely different reasons, the balance is also a 1 star, because like I mentioned, if you're summoning Alexstrasza, Deathwing, Nozdormu, Malygos, and Ysera, and you have to have all of those cards in your deck, and you have to be weighted down with this useless card in the opening, which is going to be in your hand, that is not good. It's a pretty good reward, but it's not game winning. And could you rebalance it to win you the game? Sure. But it's so far off balance right now. 1 star balance. Queen's Bane. Paladin, 1 mana, 1/3. Death Rattle, shuffle this into your deck. It keeps any enchantments. I think this is a very clever twist on King's Bane. And similar to King's Bane, you can actually try to fetch Queen's Bane with the Witchwood Piper. Unlike King's Bane, Queen's Bane has a very big weakness to silence. You can't really silence King's Bane, but Queen's Bane, go for it. Very clever design, I'll give it 5 stars. It is a bit overtuned right now because 1 mana 1/3 is actually played in Odd Paladin, and this would just be a strict buff on it. So 2 generally good right now. I feel like all you need to do though is dock it down to a 1 mana 1/2. I'd give the balance 4 stars. Finally, we have Deck Betrayal, a hunter card. You might be wondering what in the world is going on as you look at this 0 mana spell, which says destroy your hero, cast this when drawn. This always starts at the bottom of your deck. And I feel like this is an interesting design perspective, which is basically, wow, with this card you can run a 28 card deck. And in fact, to some extent, it's a bit too boring and bad design to have a card that allows for a 28 card deck because every aggro deck is just going to run it. The only reason why this might not be run too much is because Deathstalker Rexar exists, and with that card you actually want to go long, but after that rotates out, pretty much all mid-range hunters would also want to run deck Betrayal just to make sure to cut the weakest performing card out of their deck, at the slight downside that you don't go into the fatigue phase anymore. But if you think back at it, most mid-range hunters, like, that was never a problem. So the design is bad just because it's a really boring card, you just put 2 copies of it. It also has absolutely no flavor whatsoever. But where the balance comes into play is that a hunter deck could simply run 2 of these, and a deck that really tried to mill through their deck very fast and then play Togwaggle when they had 2 cards left in the deck, also known as deck Betrayal. You can get through your deck really fast if you're a hunter, if you try, with the tracking, burning 3 cards, just a bunch of draw, play the Togwaggle and win the game. That is not okay. So not only do I think that the design is bad, the balance is also seriously off because of that. So 1 star on design and 1 star on balance. That's your cards of the week. I hope that I'm able to continue explaining why specifically cards are rated for design and balance. That should alleviate a few of your concerns. Thank you, as usual, for all of the feedback. Please comment on how I'm doing at rating these cards. I want to be known as the best card rater across the land.